So this is a talk about a different kind of yes. It's not, unfortunately, it's not about some epic adventure or long distance cycle or crossing the ocean or climbing a big mountain. But it has been for me a journey that has all the ingredients of an adventure. Oodles of kindness, taking a chance, finding that mental strength, facing fears, along with the highs and lows. And I guess we should go back to the start. I reckon that this chapter of a journey began on the 1st of January 2019. I had spent New Year's Eve with some people you may recognise. Recognise those people? So I'm so lucky to have made great friends with these, and I'd only met them at the beginning of 2018, yet it was like we'd known each other for years, which is what comes with being part of the Yes Tribe. And we'd had an evening of games, drink, campfire, some glitter, more drink, and putting the world to rights. Perfect. 2019 was going to be my year. I was probably in the best shape I've ever been after my big trike trip of 2018. I felt really good. However, on the 1st of January, I woke up with a sore throat. I put it down to a couple of fairly heavy nights of alcohol, but by the evening it was possibly the worst sore throat and pain I had experienced. Not the perfect start to 2019, and I had to go to the urgent walk-in care clinic where the nurse prescribed me with antibiotics and said I had tonsillitis. In the next week, rather than improve, I have never felt so ill in my life. The second doctor I saw a couple of days later changed the prescription and said it was the antibiotics, but it didn't help. I was so ill, in fact, I sent my mum this message. I was admitted to hospital that very evening after a visit to doctor number 3. At first he dismissed it as the virus, and that I needed to rest and drink more fluid and I'd feel better in a couple of days. But later that evening, he rang me from his house after surgery because his gut was telling him something wasn't quite right. He most definitely saved my life. I was admitted to hospital with sepsis, pneumonia, pleurisy and pericarditis, which is fluid around the heart, all caused by bacterial infection. On the 8th of January, I was blue lighted from Milton Keynes Hospital to John Radcliffe, Oxford, and within 45 minutes of arriving, I'd had an emergency pericardic drain to drain the fluid that was restricting my heart. 2 weeks passed, one chest drain later amongst other procedures, and much scratching of consultants' heads. It was decided that if I didn't have major heart surgery, my recovery would be extremely slow / not guaranteed. So I had to have open heart surgery to remove part of the pericardic sac around my heart that was restricting its function. As life first go, I wouldn't recommend these to anyone. I had never been admitted to hospital. I had never broken a bone, never had an IV, never had a general anaesthetic, never been in an ambulance. And here it happened within the first few weeks of 2019. I left hospital with a booklet telling me what I could and couldn't do for 3 months. I had to move in with my mum and stepdad, and except for the next 3 months at least, I had to be looked after. The only exercise I was allowed to walk round the block once a day, and that gradually increased to 2 times a day. I think it was only week 8 that I was allowed to make a light lunch or do light house chores. Now, I'm not downplaying how serious this all was. Yet I'm convinced that our brains don't allow us to realise quite how serious it is. But I can look back on some of the positives of this ongoing journey because it has led to many yeses along the way. Like any good adventure, I've been shown oodles of kindness. Where ask any adventurer, one of the highlights of the trip is the kindness of strangers. My particular journey highlighted the kindness from people I know. It taught me a massive, massive lesson. I mean, I'm a single lady in my late 30s and living on my own. I have had moments where I felt really alone, but this taught me that I most certainly am not. The amount of folk that took time to send messages, phone me, send gifts and visit me in hospital and at home was overwhelming at times, but it certainly helped in the healing. Accepting you are loved when you are low is really, really hard. There was part of me that felt weak, like less of me, but I'll never take for granted how important your tribe are when you need them the most. Possibly the biggest yes of all has been taking a chance. I certainly had a lot of time on my hands to do a lot of thinking, and thinking was one thing I was allowed to do. I had been wanting to change pathways for a while, but I'd not really known what or how. I guess the freelance wage I was earning was a constant tether to not make a change, despite the stresses and often unhappiness at being away from home for weeks on end. In true me style, I decided that one thing I could say yes to was something that I had wanted for as long as I could remember. And it was a surefire way that I most definitely couldn't go back to the job I had before. Get a dog. Cara arrived into my life on the exact day I had my 3-month checkup and was discharged from the care of John Radcliffe. This wiggly bum, nose sniffing, rabbit squirrel chasing, poo rolling pooch has truly been the best decision I've ever made. I had to keep up and increase my walks, and now I had another reason to walk. Moving back to my own house, I have to admit, was really overwhelming. Where loneliness hadn't bothered me that much before, I did feel really lonely. But now I did have a companion. She never fails to put a smile on my face, maybe except when there has been poo rolling. And she's there with me during the lows, and she often puts up with my neediness of wanting lots of hugs. My other big yes has been relocating to Cornwall. It's my happy place. I have a few close family members that live there, and any time I could go, I would. And there was always part of me that wanted to stay and didn't want to leave. With my freelance career, I always looked at reasons why it wouldn't work. It's too far away, it's not commutable to London, blah, 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 blah. I would just think of all the negatives of why it wouldn't work and not actually try. But I was offered a summer job last year by a friend of the family, just serving coffee near a beach in Cornwall. And I knew I couldn't go back to what I did before, so I thought, why not give it a shot? As my parents said to me, what's the worst that could happen? Which brings me on to facing your fears. Any life change is scary, and when you're changing quite a lot of things, for me anyway, it has been really scary. And the past year has been tough for me mentally. That idyllic sounding summer job, where it probably was a step too soon for my recovery. By the end of last summer, I was physically and mentally exhausted. I'd found that I'd become anxious about many, many things when anxiety hadn't been a problem for me before that. And a lot of it was around my operation and was everything normal? Could I go back to running? Could I cycle? What about surfing? Everything became a fear. Everything became a barrier. Usually I thrive in stressful situations, spinning many plates, but now I didn't have the capacity. I spent the end of last year unemployed, searching for a job, applying for anything that I liked the sound of because I felt like I should be looking for a job. But deep down, there were all these apprehensions and all these negative thoughts about each job. I also used the dog as an excuse at some points for why the job wasn't suitable. I had to admit that I had underestimated the mental recovery of such a traumatic illness. Cardiac anxiety is well known within cardiac patients, yet it wasn't something that was mentioned to me. But after talking to a friend who had been through major heart surgery, who reassured me that this was perfectly normal, I think that started the next stage of recovery. It's been really hard finding a balance between doing too much and facing my fears. But it's like any part of any journey. If you don't try and take that first step, you will never know. There have been highs and there have been lows. The lows have been really, really low. Cornwall is not an easy place to start again, but that's a whole different story. But so far, It has definitely been worth the climb. I found a beautiful fisherman's cottage to rent in a lovely harbour town, not far from my dad. And despite my ridiculous fear of waves, even though I like surfing, I have taken up sea swimming. I can walk from my front door to the harbour and dive in. Okay, I don't actually dive in because I'm a big wimp when it comes to the sea, but I climb down the steps and I get in, and it's so invigorating. I'm not quite up to going in my swimsuit yet, but I might build up to that. COVID meant that for me, 2 jobs didn't happen, but I can actually see the positives. I was on lockdown in a stunning place with glorious walks and a newfound appreciation for the changing of the seasons. Where the life changes happening all at once was overwhelming, lockdown almost forced me to slow down, to take small steps, to try things out and discover my passions again. I've rediscovered my passion for sewing and making things and being creative, and also rediscovered my passion for photography. And this has been something that I've now decided to follow and see if I could earn money doing it. I even did some doorstep portraits with some locals during lockdown just to see if I could meet a few more people in my community. I have so much more to tell you, but we will be here for a lot longer. And I'm trying to keep it to 10 minutes. If sharing my story makes one of you say yes tomorrow, I'll be really happy. Because even if saying yes is fearful, brings all this anxiety, it is worth it. My advice is to allow yourself time to embrace nature and listen to what your body needs at that time. You can learn so much. If you break your yes into smaller steps and smaller tasks, you will find it less of a fear and less overwhelming. You can learn many lessons by going out on an adventure. I know without my trike trip of 2018, I may not have realised what mental strength I do have. It's about saying yes to small changes. It's about saying yes no matter the boundaries, because the view from the top is amazing. I've realised I have the strength, and I think everyone does inside them, to climb whatever your mountain is. We just have to be brave enough to take that first step. And with the Yes Tribe behind you, that is a lot easier. The journey isn't over yet, and it is work in progress. There are good days and there are bad days. But I know that I keep taking those small steps forward. So keep an eye out for further chapters. In the words of Ronan Keating, life is a roller coaster. In the words of Joe Bradshaw's dad, say yes and work the rest out later. And in the words of Dave Cornthwaite, say yes more.